Hello students and welcome to this live analysis of Maharashtra MBA CET 2026 slot 2. So this is day 1 slot 2 analysis which happened from 2 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. on 6th of April 2026. So let us start by first discussing the pattern of the paper. So this CET paper was exactly along the expected lines in terms of pattern. There were no surprises. The number of questions were as disclosed earlier. There were 75 questions asked in logical reasoning section, which was followed by abstract reasoning, 25 questions. Then quant and data interpretation put together had 50 questions. And then finally, verbal ability and reading comprehension, another 50 questions. So total 200 questions to be attempted in 150 minutes. Each question had 5 options, out of which one option is correct. And 1 mark was awarded per correct answer, no negative marking for any question. So even if a student answers the question incorrectly, there was no penalty. So all this was along the expected lines for Maharashtra CET paper. Okay. Now, in terms of the actual sections of the CET paper, let us go through them one by one. So the first section in terms of the order present in the paper was logical reasoning. Now on the logical reasoning section, one big uh, uh, change that was noticed in this slot as reported by the students is there were no lengthy puzzles as such. There were no multi-question puzzles or multi-question sets that were present in this slot at all. All the 75 questions that were there in logical reasoning were individual single questions. Okay. There were questions that were there from input-output question model. 5 such questions were present and all were single questions. So those questions were acting as a speed breaker for students in this particular slot. So students would be advised to not attempt those questions during the exam, or at least leave them for the later stages of the exam. If you are doing logical reasoning first, those input-output questions would have been speed breakers in that section. All other question models were as expected on the CET exam. Many questions were present from blood relations question model, and then direction sense was also tested. Coding, decoding was present. There were questions with replacement of symbols and notations where plus symbol is to be replaced with some other symbol. Those kind of questions have been reported by students. There was questions based on deductions that were asked in this exam, in this section. A few deductions questions were there. Venn diagrams based questions were asked. There were no questions from the critical reasoning part. So those questions where you have to strengthen arguments, weaken arguments, you have to give causes and reasons, those kind of verbal reasoning questions or critical reasoning questions were not present in this section. Okay. Then there were questions of series or odd man out analogies. Those kind of questions were present. Clocks and calendars were not asked in this slot. There were no questions from decision-making topic or cubes topic. Those topics were not tested in this slot. So many questions from the topics blood relations, the direction sense, coding, decoding, and symbols and notations were present. Questions based upon counting in a series. So there were a series of alphabets given or series of digits and alphabets and symbols given, and questions like which is the 10th from the left end, 8th from the right end. Those kind of counting based questions were present in this slot on the logical reasoning section. Okay. The next section that was present in the order was 25 question abstract reasoning section. Now in this abstract reasoning section, there were questions based on counting how many figures of particular type are there. So questions like count how many triangles in a given figure, or how many rectangles, how many squares, those kind of questions, a lot of those were present in this particular slot. So students have reported those questions were time consuming and difficult questions of abstract reasoning section. There were many questions of same nature repeated in the section. So same logic present in multiple questions happened in this slot in abstract reasoning. Series-based questions were there, analogies were there, and same logic was repeated in multiple questions. So those kind of questions, once you have done one question of that type, when a similar question appeared, students were able to do it very quickly. So this section, students were able to attempt except for the figure counting questions, others very easily and quickly. Okay, so those were 25 questions of abstract reasoning. Then 50 questions of quant and data interpretation was the third section in the order in the exam. Of course, students can attempt the questions in whatever order they want to. So they can jump and skip across sections and choose whichever question they want to attempt first. Okay. So in the quant and the data interpretation section, uh, there were total 10 questions of data interpretation, and the remaining 40 questions were quant questions. There were some questions of data sufficiency present on the quant section in the 40 quant questions. Okay. The 10 data interpretation questions had two sets of 5 questions each. Both the sets were reported by students to be on easy side. Calculation wise, they were not very difficult to attempt. Both the sets were heavy in terms of percentage based calculations. Okay. So now one set had data given in bar graph form, and in the other set, the data was given in pie chart form. But both the sets, the data was very easy to read and understand, and calculations also not that difficult. Now, as far as the quant questions are concerned, it was arithmetic heavy quant in this particular slot of CET. A few questions of geometry mensuration were present. Few probability permutation combination questions were present. Algebra questions were not asked. Now, in arithmetic, the topic that dominated was time and work. Few questions of time and distance were present. Again, in quant also it was seen that questions of the same nature were repeated in the same slot. So once a question has been done by the student, when they find similar question again asked in the same section, they were able to do it pretty quickly. So same type of questions were asked in the same slot. Then, in the arithmetic section, as I said earlier, time and work questions were present quite a lot. Then there were time and distance questions. Percentage questions were present as expected. Profit and loss few questions were there. Some ratio based questions were asked. In mensuration, area based questions were present. Not many questions were seen in terms of pure geometry. It was all about calculating areas of two-dimensional figures. There was nothing asked in three-dimensional figures in the quant section. Okay. Algebra, as I said earlier, was not tested in this section, in this slot. So those were the 50 questions of quant summarized. Then the fourth section was the English language section, that is the verbal reasoning and reading comprehension section. Now, in those 50 questions, there were 25 questions of reading comprehension. 5 passages were present in the section, and each passage had 5 questions. So, total 25 questions of reading comprehension. Out of the 5 passages, couple of passages were difficult to read. The others, the remaining 3 were easy to read and understand, and questions were okay to answer, not very difficult, but 2 passages were dense in terms of the content and would have taken some time to understand thoroughly. So students would have found those 25 questions, especially the 10 questions in 2 dense to read passage, as speed breakers in the verbal reasoning section. The remaining 25 questions which were there of verbal ability, those questions were consisting of para jumbles. There were sentences given which had to be put in order. Same set of sentences were present for multiple questions. So once you have put the sentences in order, then you will be able to attempt 2 questions based on that same set of sentences. So again, students, once you have put some time in arranging the statements properly, two questions were present on the same set of sentences. Then there were questions where students had to find grammatical errors or spelling mistakes. There were questions of synonyms and antonyms that were present in the verbal ability section. And those questions students would have found very easy to attempt and very fast to do. Okay, so that was the general overview of the 4 sections on the CET exam slot 2 for 2026. Now, in general, one thing that was noticed in this particular year's CET is the interface is not very easy to work with. So what happens, as students have reported, is the questions are very difficult to see. This especially is for lengthy questions. Quant questions were usually 1 or 2 lines, so it was not much of an issue in quant. But for data interpretation or for RCs or abstract reasoning, so questions which took up a lot of space on the screen, it was difficult to see everything together on the screen. The question panel which was present on the right hand side, then the questions itself took up a lot of screen space. So the data that was given had little bit of space remaining on the screen. And the students had to use the zoom button. The zoom button itself was also problematic because it was only in one direction that the zoom could be changed. So once you have zoomed up, if you have increased the font size, then if you want to go back, then you have to cycle through all the different font sizes, and only then you can go back to the smaller font size. So what happened is, for a particular question, suppose you have zoomed. So this was again true mainly for abstract reasoning. If you have zoomed in for one question to see that figure properly, then that same zoom level stayed for the next question. So when you switch to the next question, that question probably did not require that much of zooming in. Then it was not possible to see that question on the screen properly. Then to go back to the original zoom, you have to cycle through all the zoom levels. And there are multiple levels of zooming that were available. So you have to cycle through all of those. Only then you can go back to the original magnification. So that was a little bit of problematic thing that was present in this year's interface. Okay, so be aware of that. Further, as far as interface was concerned, there were no other issues. Uh, there were no surprises also. All the questions were available for the students throughout the entire time of 150 minutes. So as I said earlier, students have the ability of jumping to any section that they want to. So students should strategize beforehand and decide which sections they are going to attempt first, which section they should be doing later. So this is something for students who are going to take their CET in the further slots. Make sure that you plan properly, decide the section order, and attempt give enough amount of time for every section so that you are able to do all the easy questions that are present across all the different sections. Okay, so next we will talk about the uh, scoring as such. So now in this year's CET, it was observed that the sections were all easy to moderate. All the sections, it can be said in general, were of easy to moderate level. There were, of course, certain questions that were present that should have been skipped during the exam. Students would be well advised to not attempt those questions. But in general, the sections were all easy to moderate. On the quant section, there would be around 4 to 5 questions that would have taken some time for students to solve. Otherwise, remaining questions were all doable. Students should have spent roughly around 40 minutes on the quant section and attempted around 40 questions out of the 50 that were present. For the abstract reasoning section, the good number of attempts would be around 20 questions to be done in around 15 minutes. That would be advisable. There were 5 or 6 questions present on this abstract reasoning section, which were based on counting figures, which would be lengthy and time consuming. Students should be avoiding those questions in this particular section. For logical reasoning, a good number of attempts would be around 55 questions out of 75. Some students might have even done more in logical reasoning if they have decided to put more amount of time in this section. But those who are giving it around 1 hour of time should be able to do around 55 questions or so in logical reasoning. The speed breaker questions in this section were input-output questions. There were some questions of linear and arrangements and ordering of persons. Those also were time consuming. So those few questions along with input-output should have been avoided in this section. Finally, for the verbal section, as I said earlier, there were two passages which were difficult. All other questions in verbal section should have been attempted. So for verbal section, a good number of attempts would be around 40 questions to be done in around 35 to 40 minutes. Now, a good score for this section would be 145 plus. For students who are targeting 99 plus percentile, should be looking at scores of 150 plus. I would expect it is expected that students, the toppers of this section, would be able to reach scores of 165 or so. Okay, so these are the general points in short regarding this slot 2 of Maharashtra MBA CET. So with this, I'll be ending this session over here. Wish you all the very best. Thank you.